But first, the anger in relation to this Brereton Report and the response by political and military leadership has angered Australians, and justifiably. We are now in the realm that defence and government are good at, the big cover-up. Wounds of the families of our fallen heroes have been reopened, learning that our loved ones would lose their unit citations. But panicked, Prime Minister Morrison seems to be saying that won't happen. That is not relevant. What is relevant is that the so-called leaders sought to punish, without conviction, the entire Special Forces community who have fought for over a decade in Australia's longest war. The Prime Minister and people like Campbell and Burr, so-called defence leaders, have torn at our democratic and constitutional foundation, which holds dear the presumption of innocence. The Prime Minister of Australia cast allegations of brutal truths into the national and international media before due process had occurred. And in undermining the necessary support towards our current serving service personnel over matters that occurred more than 7 years ago, they have done so on such a scale that they've destabilised our strategic position within the international community at a time when we're already engaged in a Cold War with China. We've seen the manifestations of that with trade sanctions and, of course, the fake image. Well, tonight, where did this begin? And here is where we must be given answers. It seems that some years ago, Defence agreed to have a book written on the SAS in Afghanistan. What process did Defence use to determine who would be the most appropriate person to write the book? Were there tenders? Was there a formal evaluation of various authors? How was the chosen person, Chris Masters, appointed? Why select someone who is not an historian? Did Defence see Masters' contract with Allen and Unwin? How much did Masters receive as a royalty advance? What agreement did Defence arrive at with Masters for access to information and documents? Who negotiated the terms of engagement with Masters? Was he represented by lawyers or publishers? Who represented Defence? Was this a profit-making exercise for the author and the publisher? A person writing a book on the SAS? What financial arrangements were made for profit sharing or for a percentage of revenue share or contributions to charitable groups such as Soldiers, Legacy or SAS Trusts? Or was this a sole profit undertaking with the author and the publisher, Allen and Unwin, the sole beneficiaries? Did Defence provide any other financial benefits, such as being embedded with our troops, helicopter transport, accommodation, or other assistance that had financial value? What assistance in personnel was provided to the author? What, if any, other assistance was provided? Now, surely in any profit undertaking, it would be normal to recover these outlays from the person profiting from the writing. What arrangements were agreed with Masters on matters of finance, costs, and recovery of these by Defence? What processes were agreed upon in regard to the gathering of information? Did that include access to personnel and details of actions? Was Mr Masters given security clearances? If so, at what level? Who authorised them? If not, how is he expected to gather the information required to write a book without breaching the Official Secrets Act? What arrangements and oversight were in place to ensure this didn't happen? Now, stay with me. There is a reason these questions must be answered by Defence and the government. To whom was Mr Masters responsible? Defence? Army? Any other parties? Did the Army or Defence require some formal reporting back so they could be aware if any sensitivities were breached? Which brings us to the Brereton Report. Is it true that Mr Masters made the most submissions about rumours of our soldiers at war to the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force, otherwise known as the Afghanistan Inquiry? Was any rumour-based material, which was the subject of the inquiry, originally provided by Mr Masters? How was that presented and to whom? Was a copy of the book given to the Committee of Inquiry to read prior to its release? Were changes made to the book as a result of that presentation and submission to the committee? And if so, what were they? And who from Defence oversaw this process? What process was in place to ensure during the exercise, which seems to have run for years, that there was no breach either of personal information, sensitive information or secrets in the context of this being a commercial undertaking for profit? In other words, how much was Mr Masters subjected to oversight by the Defence Department in this critical and sensitive environment. Surely someone was responsible for ensuring this. In an article that appeared as far back as 2017 in one of Australia's leading newspapers, there appears to be material that may have been redacted from Mr Masters' book. How would details of the statements involved be in the hands of journalists? Were these provided by Defence or other people? The point that has to be made is how much of the rumour and allegation of the Brereton Report derives from the fact that Defence agreed to have a book written on the SAS? And to what extent was Mr Masters a source of these rumours and allegations? After all, they help sell books, and the book has been sold, presumably for profit. Is the author the sole beneficiary? And to what extent have all the men of the SAS become collateral damage? I'm not suggesting anything other than this. All of the above questions should be answered. The first of those is, was the author, Chris Masters, responsible for most of the submissions about rumours made to the Brereton inquiry? Have our men, who put their lives on the line, served and sacrificed, been used so that someone could make a quid? Now, this is not essentially Mr Masters' fault. Who in Defence gave the green light to all of this? Australians have got to unite together to support our armed forces, to ensure common sense prevails and our fallen heroes and their families are allowed to rest in peace. We, the voters, must make sure that our senior leaders in government and defence are accountable. At the moment, they are at best evasive, at worst delinquent. I repeat, the Prime Minister has questions to answer. Campbell and Burr, at the head of Defence, and perhaps others, should go. What do you think? Email me, alan@skynews.com.au, or the text line 0414 000 848. And remember, you can listen live on the iHeart Radio app.